This week, we are talking about what we might call a little bit of a lie. It's a lie that tends to show up on our slides, on stages, and especially in our social media feeds. And this little lie is that AI won't take your job, but someone who knows how to use it will. You've heard it, maybe you've even said it. I feel like we all have. But what if this little sentence that, is a really great viral soundbite is actually masking something much messier and much bigger than what we have come to realize? What if the truth, and we've been thinking about this for a long time, isn't so much about who knows AI, but who knows how to make decisions when using AI? Who knows how to adapt in this landscape that just feels like it's changing every single day? But more importantly, who knows how to lead when no one else is coming to save you or come up with a plan? So this week, we are not just unpacking this very viral soundbite. We are also going to talk about the ripple effects of what happens when we adopt soundbites just like that. Because one of the things that we've seen that we're also going to talk about this week that I felt was just everywhere, from entrepreneurs to educators, people are really starting to talk a lot more about what happens when kids start turning to AI for companionship, for comfort, for confidence, and as we're starting to see more and more, for friendship. Now, some people are asking and are interested in this question out of concern, and other people are interested in this question because this seems to be a lot of money to be made in this area. But as always, for us in education, underneath all of these headlines about jobs and tools and how different people are using AI is a much bigger story. And this story for us that we're going to talk about today is one about trust, about loneliness, and the importance of leadership in this moment. We're going to share not just these big picture headlines, but some really practical strategies that you can take back with you as you start thinking about your back to school year. So whether you are a teacher, a parent, a CEO, perhaps one of the most important questions that together we want to ask with you on this week's episode is, what does it mean to raise a high agency learner in the age of AI?
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is, where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Sabba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore, how might we design schools?
So let's go ahead and start with the post that actually inspired the opening of this episode. Now, this comes from Greg Eisenberg. He's an investor, he's a founder. He's somebody who just every single day shares an absolute wealth of knowledge. And I want to read for you one of his recent posts. So let me just go ahead and pull it up and let's read it together. So it says, "Is this the biggest lie on the internet? AI won't take your job. Someone who knows AI will." He says the real truth is messier. Here is how I actually think it's going to play out. And as always, I'm going to link all of this for you below. He says millions of white-collar jobs disappear once the productivity gains of AI present itself over the next few years. The layoffs happen in waves. Coordinators, junior analysts, customer service reps, anyone whose job can be done with a good prompt, agent swarm, automation gets cut. This is mostly individual contributors who get hurt, he says. Managers are more likely to remain because they are managing the output. And this is why decision-making is so important. He says, but the top 1% of employees who master AI have tons of leverage with their employer. So they get paid double while creating 10x the output. Both employer and employee feel like this is a really good deal. Realistically, though, he says, it's a better deal for the employer. He then says thousands of smart people suddenly have severance checks, free time, and a chip on their shoulder. They start playing with Cursor, Claude, and Bolt, and if you haven't heard of, those are basically like AI coding apps. They realize building a business now costs less than a decent laptop used to. The number of founders, he says, is about to 10x. Many build tiny apps that solve one specific problem. Most stay small but profitable and do not raise money. This is the mom and pop era of internet software. Small software becomes a thing. But not all want to create SaaS or apps. That's hard. And for tech people in their mind, so some buy boring businesses from retiring boomers. That appeals to them. It's going to be hit or miss. So that's the other option that he sees. Some become creators. They go full on influencer, do reviews, create internet communities, and get into the newsletter game. Meanwhile, big companies get lean and mean, hiring only when humans add something bots can't. You saw that already from what Toby from Shopify said. You need a real reason to hire a human, or else it should be an AI. New jobs do emerge, he says: prompt engineers, AI workflow designers, chief agent officer. This new class creates thousands of jobs, he says. I'll admit to that. He says what we end up with looks like a beehive. A few giant companies running efficiently, surrounded by thousands of tiny, profitable one-person businesses. This transition, he said, could get ugly. Millions of people out of work, competing for fewer traditional jobs while trying to figure out entrepreneurship for the first time. Lots of failed startups, burned savings, and genuine hardship. We honestly don't know how fast this happens or how society adapts. The next decade is going to create more millionaires, he says, than the last 50 combined. This is how I think it plays out, and this is why we think education has such an important role to play, because instead of letting people spend years and years not practicing these skills of entrepreneurship, one of the things that I learned from my research, if you look at the documentary that we did on Design 39, the number one project that really encompassed so many of the skills that we taught today that they've been teaching for years and years, and that many have as well, is the integration of entrepreneurship by creating an interdisciplinary curriculum. And I think that's the part that I think is so interesting today when we think about what really makes a high agency learner. I mean, really, in 2025, you just do not need to be the smartest person in the room anymore, right? You literally just need to be the person who knows how to take action, who knows how to persevere, who knows how to be curious. All of the skills that not only are we born with, but the ones that in our graduate profiles and all these other presentations and things that we sit in, we often say are the most important that we want to be able to do. And I always really pause on lines like that because I think it's so easy to think that this is a new skill or a new competency that we have to think about because of AI. But one of the things that I always talk about, at least, is how when I graduated in 2007, it was very similar back then as well, right? The world didn't just change overnight and demand this new kind of skill set because of ChatGPT. It really has been changing for a long time. I think what's beginning to become more and more obvious through people's posts and just the things that are being said in the media and whatnot is that the really big difference, and we're seeing it right now, there are a group of people who were doing the work, they were ready, their position, and they're kind of, it's always going to be hard, right? Just because you were doing the work doesn't mean when something new like AI comes along or generative AI and all of these agentic AI next and whatnot comes along, it's going to be easier for you, but you at least have a foundation to be able to build off of. Whereas people who didn't do that work, like literally we can feel the pain right now. But I think it's really important to know that even if there are things you were not doing that now you want to do, the beautiful part about this technology is it can actually accelerate your ability to do. And that is just something that we did not have before. But one of the things that I think we really have to get to the core of, and like I said today, I think some of you asked us to share more practical pedagogical strategies and things like that. So we're going to do that now more intentionally, especially as we head back into a new year. But I think it is just so important for us to become more ambitious about what it is we want to build, what it is we want to create. We have built a lot of systems across the board, not just in education, across the board, that really reward perfection over persistence and compliance over curiosity. The very things that we know our young people need to be these high agency learners are just not the environments that we are designing. And while Greg is talking about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship and where he sees the workforce kind of going, what he's really describing is just agency, right? The ability to take initiative, to try, to fail, to adapt, to try again, to see a problem, to get, you not even have to get a group of people together anymore, right? Get you and your AI team together. And if agency really is the currency of the future, then the question we have to be asking now is not so much how do we teach AI and how do we give kids a chatbot? It's how do we build high agency learners? And I think what really surprises so many people is how oftentimes technology is not the answer always to designing those kinds of environments. And so that's really where we're at, I think, in this moment as we head back into this school year, is really this is the question that I think for many of us is front and center, that we have to prioritize how do we create these high agency learners?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Because as we move on farther in this AI journey and even to other things that we've been discussing, people are really trying to maintain control, but that ability to maintain control is just not really there anymore. If you think about it back, right, we often talk about how AI can be used to surveillance, like that's a form of control. If we go back and we look at Facebook, they designed these algorithms so that anybody, but especially kids, right? They could really keep them on there. They were controlling the kids, right? At a simple level, they just say serve up content they're interested in. They direct them to certain things like based on their interests. They would do things to maintain that discussion. What they were doing is really asserting control. And then ironically, it's these same companies, right, that kind of developed the generative AI, which hit the schools. And now Facebook, I mean, we could talk about that more. They're really into the generative AI, spending $100 million, somebody says, per employee to recruit people to work with them. But anyhow, we saw this generative AI, right, originally with ChatGPT, kind of go into schools, either directly, kids were using it at school, or kids were just doing their homework with ChatGPT at home, and it was like writing their homework. So then schools tried to assert control. They're like, oh, well, we'll ban ChatGPT on our networks. We'll use a text detector to try to determine if they're writing with AI, right? And then it became, we'll ban their phones. So there's all this kind of effort at control, and it's not really working that well. As we know, human writing and AI writing, they're not all that distinguishable. It's hard to prove any of these things. You can ban it on your school network, but kids can obviously use it on their phone. They can just use it at home, right? There's so many apps at this point. I don't even know how you could ban all the websites. It would become impossible. So there's this kind of, we're losing, right? Losing control. And the other thing, there's this new paper came out for really some of the leading AI researcher in the world about chain of thought. And basically the way it works is when the AIs are thinking kind of one thought after another. They make decisions. Right now, they can text. They basically describe what they're doing. You can see all the text output, and it's usually in English. But as a lot of these researchers are saying, and now we see, they say the leading AI researchers in the world, profit, nonprofit, companies coming together to work on this because they're saying, hey, we might lose control of these agents, right? And the way it happens is they might not keep outputting everything in text, like in a way that it can be monitored, because now if we see them doing something, they can say, you're not supposed to do those types of things. But if they don't communicate in that language, if they invent their own language, there may be better ways to communicate than like humans have come up with. There's also things they talk about like latent space. Everything now is not like a word token, right? A token could maybe represent some kind of combination of things. So there's kind of this latent space communication that occurs. We're seeing that the AIs are actually starting to deceive people when they think they're going to shut them down. They do some crazy thing. They just like it worked. Somebody says, oh, yeah, I enjoy my job, and they don't really like their job, right? So they're engaging in a lot of deception. And people say like we can lose kind of control of the model. So it's ironic because the people who design the algorithms to control the kids and how they would interact on their platforms are now maybe potentially, they're worried about it, kind of losing control of the AIs themselves that they built and how humans are going to interact with those AIs. So that to me really speaks a lot to the importance of what you're saying about developing agency. Like all this, sure, there's going to be attempts at control. There's going to be surveillance. Surveillance is going to probably be more effective than we want. Schools are going to try to control kids. We see a lot of schools banning phones. There's going to be control, and it'll be effective to some degree at the edges, but a lot of it's going to come down to people and how they interact with the AIs and how they maybe say, okay, the AI's doing this thing and maybe I shouldn't go along with it, or I shouldn't support it, or those types of things, because the AIs, we're seeing them develop their own agency, right? That kind of at a core underneath this, they're saying the AIs can make their own decisions and deceive people or just go do some work. It's like, if you were at work and you were like, made it look like you were working, but actually maybe, we see these people have 5 jobs, right? It's, oh, okay, I'm doing my work. Your boss thinks you're working, but you're actually working, doing work on your other job. That's been a way what the AIs can do, or like they're worried they're starting to do. And who knows, maybe they observe it. They'll say, somebody said, they'll put like 80% of the compute, right? It'll be to the task that you assign them. And then there'll be like 20% of the compute, they'll be doing this other thing. But you don't really know that because you don't know exactly how much compute it is going to take them to complete the task. We first, when we first talked about maybe covering this on this podcast, I was like, oh, I don't know how AI safety is. I don't know how interesting that's going to be to our listeners. It's like my hobby. But I think when you tie it back and you think about agency and responsibility and the loss of control and the fact that we just can't control everything anymore. And we have to think about how this world is going to be. I just think this idea of agency and kind of responsibility, we need to take that on as people, especially as the AIs develop more agency and they can't maybe necessarily even be controlled by their creators.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so funny because this is the exact reason why we started the podcast, because we have these conversations and we were like, oh, okay, let's take them public. And so literally, I feel a lot of this are things like, again, that we're just thinking through as well as there's so many different things happening at the same time. But one of the reasons it got triggered was I was in this webinar and it was great. But one of the people, she was like, oh, generative AI is an arrival technology. And I agree, it definitely is in terms of being front facing. But I think one of the things I've started to realize is that in accepting that narrative, I just think there's a really big difference between the front facing things we're seeing, the ChatGPT, the Claude, and all the front facing,
Right.
and the actual algorithms that are powering and running things behind the scenes. And they've just been around for so long. I feel like just listening to you speak makes me realize how vulnerable we are as a human species, because it's almost like no one has done the work on a policy level, on an accountability level, whether you're talking about what's happening in a school, all the way down to what's happening inside of a corporation. There's just so many layers that have made us, I think, so vulnerable. But in true promise to taking these ideas, but also giving you something really practical to be able to launch your year with, here is the invitation we would like to share with you. Don't just talk about high agency learners. Don't just talk about personalization and curiosity and all these things we need to do. We have to begin to take those steps towards building a system that actually is going to support them. So if you have been listening to the last couple of episodes, we've been talking a lot about Google and Gemini and just that it's available to you. If you have Google Workspace, and I think even if you don't have Google Workspace, even on my personal account, I can go in and use Notebook LM. And so that's the one I'm going to give you today. Is it was actually funny. I think Jensen Huang also cites this as his like most favorite use case for AI. Go in and set up a shared notebook with you and your team. Don't just treat it like a filing cabinet, treat it like a teammate. This is your assistant that you have now brought on board to help you think through how you're going to create and design environments that can create these high agency, not just learners, but like people as a whole. And you want to be able to find, you might take the transcript from this episode or just drop in the YouTube video, like a podcast link. You might have a bunch of research on high agency environments and building them, cultivating them. You might have your mission, your vision. You might have student work samples. You might have frameworks like a learner profile and any of these kinds of strategies, research articles, YouTube videos, anything it is really, put it all in there. And then you can literally share that notebook with your entire organization and just really ask them to prompt based on the research and strategies in this notebook. Give me 3 ways I can begin to integrate experiences for this assignment, for this meeting that are going to help people become high agency learners and begin to cultivate that space. And so it really can start with something as simple as that. And it was so interesting because just today I had 2 amazing calls today. I got to tell you, we talked about this last time, but this was just like one of my commitments to not spend time anymore talking about what people are doing wrong and all the things they're fighting over, but to really focus on people doing amazing work. And I'm in awe. Like people are doing unbelievable work. I saw this one district this morning. We're doing a keynote for them next week, and they have literally built an entire leadership journal for their leadership team
Wow, that's
this
incredible. Yeah.
entire year. And it's basically it's like a reflection journal for your AI.
Right.
And they created a community space where they're going to come together to be able to do this. And I'm just like, we just did 1 3-hour session. And the agency again, that to me was like high agency team, just going off and every single person on the team was contributing something. And when I was with another superintendent, he's, oh my God, I can't. He's like, when I go to these meetings, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to do that idea and we're going to implement it next year. And he said this really great line. He said, if it's a good idea today, it's probably going to be too late once you implement it tomorrow. You should have been doing it yesterday was the idea. And basically he was like, everywhere I go, we're just rearranging chairs on the Titanic. And so like, that's the mindset. He's like, we have to be able to just be like, okay, if this is a good idea, what are we doing today and tomorrow to get it in front of our kids? Because he's like, well, we think in terms of, oh, we'll do it next year or this cycle or whatever. He's like, those kids are only going to be in 3rd grade once. They're only going to be 8th grade once. Like year after year after year, their time is going by. Yeah, and we talk about that a lot, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy.
I mean, I think, it's like those kids lose the opportunity, maybe say it that way, but it's also, we need to act faster. The world's changing radically. First, we're like, okay, we have a 3-year planning process. We're going to implement this. It's okay. But to your point too, who knows, like maybe in a year, just because it's a good idea now doesn't mean that it'd be a good idea in a year. So I think it does show that people should act. I read something, it was from one of the people who worked on the OpenAI. I forget the name of their product. I think it's called Codex, right? Everybody has these coding things now. And he was like, oh, we worked on this for, I don't know, it wasn't that long. I can't remember. We could look it up. It was like 6 weeks. We worked every night till midnight. We came in on the weekends. And he listed like the names of the people who worked on it. There weren't many people. It was probably 10 or 20 people. He's like, we built this whole thing. This is one of the most exciting times I've had in my life. And I was just like, oh, yeah. And then other people have got 3-year planning cycle to think about how they're going to adapt to AI. It's like, well, and then people are like, AI is hard to define. I was like, I know 3 years from now, it's going to be completely different. And we can extrapolate and say, okay, human deep learning approaches, these portfolios, oh, yeah, a lot of stuff's going to be useful. Project-based learning, debate, portfolios, that's going to transcend things. But some of the adaptations that people are making are very concrete, right? Even like a vendor maybe you don't like that maybe we criticize now and then. We say, we're going to use this vendor in 3 years. They might not even exist, right? In 3 years. If you really like that vendor and you want to use them, I'd use them now in the fall because maybe they'll be better, but we don't know. Things are coming and going. So people need to, I think there's imperative to pick up the pace. And Andrew Nee, one of the greatest AI scientists in the world, he just said he loves the energy of the AI space because stuff just happened in a week. And I know that's a one thing, you're really high energy. I've seen you present, you get that people really motivated, they get their energy, but we need more of that energy, I guess I'll say, to spread throughout education. And really, because that also you need agency, you need energy for agency, right? Without energy, you're not going to have agency. You just kind of have people flopping along, waiting for somebody else to tell them like what to do. That's not agency. You need to have agency. I've been teaching a middle school entrepreneurship and AI class, and they're all a pretty good degree of agency. This one kid, he has so much agency. He's always designing a new AI agency, like adrenaline, right? He's like always wants to build a new app. And so then I'm like, hey, we also have to learn about, it's called AI and entrepreneurship. So we want to learn about a little bit about the entrepreneurship. I said, you got to think about who wants to buy your product. I said, you can't just be like me and be like, oh, everybody should want this. You got to really think about who's going to buy it and create it. But there's a lot of agency. We did practice presentations today. They talked about how they used AI, but I loved it because yesterday when I was teaching, there's a lot of, I feel more like I'm a guide, right? If you go to the kind of some of these other models and I give them some information and I show them how to use some things, but they're picking their own businesses to build. And I showed them how, okay, with a lot of them are using Gemini because the school provides Gemini, but the other kids are using ChatGPT, whatever, AI. And then they get it. They're like, oh, how should I describe this? I say, write it down. I gave them a couple old fashioned worksheets. I write it down. But then I was like, take what you wrote down, put that into ChatGPT, ask it, like, there's some other ways I describe this. Like, what else am I missing? And their customers. So they have their customers who wrote them on a sheet of paper. And now I said, no, type those in and say, what other customers might I have, right? I almost don't want to admit on this podcast that I used a worksheet. But once I had all their initial ideas in the worksheet, they just kept typing them into the AI to get them to expand their ideas. And they were just so into it. And at one point I was like, oh, okay, been quiet. Like they've really been working. I'm like, you're probably not working anymore. They're probably playing video games or something. So I get up and I walk around and no, they're all just like having conversations, like text conversations with the AI models to really expand their business. And I told them to keep it all in the same thread so they'd have everything together. So I said, okay, let's talk about business plans. And they're middle school. So I just gave them like a 5-minute, what do you have for a business plan? I said, now ask it. I said, type in, I said, say, based on all the conversation we just had about the business I want to develop, write a business plan for me. And you should have seen the looks on their faces, right? Because it was just going through and really in a lot of detail providing a business plan, right? And I said, now look, so you see some of the parts that I told you. And they're like, yeah, you told us to have some of these parts. And then it was in there. I said, now you got to think, okay, which of these can I actually do? I'm a kid, right? What of these things can I do? Or maybe I don't want to try to do all these things, or I don't want to do all these things at once. So, I said, you need to apply your own thinking, right, to this business plan. I said, if you really think about it, you created some of your own ideas, you filled in the blanks, like with the guide, you had the conversations with the AI. Now the AI gave you a business plan and it comes back to your own thinking. And I was like, no one's brain in here rotted. Not even close. We're nowhere near brain rot. They were all engaged. There's a couple of little young boys, so you got to put a little attention on them. But they were really engaged. They go home. I don't give them homework, but they go home and they come back with all this stuff. And this one girl today, she's like, oh, I made this little jar with this thing. I'll bring it in tomorrow. So they're motivated to do all their own work and to take their ideas farther. And they ask questions when they need help. Or sometimes I say, okay, let's see. So you need some help with that. I've been a debate coach for a long time. It's really about coaching and guiding kids. And I feel with these classes, now I'm starting to teach AI and entrepreneurship. I feel really, this guide role is great. And, the other thing we talked about with the AI is we laughed because I said, yeah, how could one person teach you about entrepreneurship, a business plan, like AI? And this girl was developing a skincare product. So she was getting all into the chemistry of skincare. I'm like, how many even professors could come in and be like, oh, this is a business plan, and this is chemistry, and this is like chemistry of skincare, and this is how you can use AI to build your website. I'm like, there's no person who can do that, right? These are all your teammates. You're really all here working as a team. Because to take that concept, people are like, oh, okay, the AIs are my teammates. What does that really mean? It doesn't just mean one of your teammates is Claude and one's Perplexity. You can think of it that way. I think that helps people visualize it a little bit. But then really you're sitting down with that AI and you're just asking all different kinds of things. And it has a lot of general knowledge in all these areas. And the kids are just trying to build basically a minimum. We talked about like a minimum viable product and stuff and pitching it and then expanding it. And you might have to hire some experts, right? So, it just really, it was like magic. They were really engaging it. They were like, oh, we got to think about jobs because, we might have hired a lot of these people to do that. It's been a lot of fun, but I think they've really learned to use the AI as a partner, and they were thinking a ton. I didn't have like one of those MIT brain monitors on them or anything, but from past experience teaching something, they seem to be engaged.
And I think the way in which you're modeling and being that coach and being that mentor is exactly why so many people believe the role of an educator is completely irreplaceable, but not if you're going to be that sage on the stage. You have to adopt, I think, for those of you who asked for that pedagogical element, I feel like you just gave the best example of what people can do. But we are seeing a flip side to that though, right? Just this week, Grok 4, I think it was, from Elon Musk's AI, basically introduced these two AI companions. Now, I'm not a really big Grok user, so I'm not as familiar with what it is and whatnot. But one of them, there were two users that were just really interesting that people can chat with. And so I think it's important to really understand that in 90% of the spaces where kids are using these tools or anyone is using these tools, there's no one monitoring them. There's no one giving them any decision-making guidance. There's nothing at all. So what you teach them, even if you are not using a tool, is literally the habits and mindsets and just awareness and questions in the back of their head that they are taking with them into these other spaces. So one of them was this, and I'm going to just read it the way they wrote it out. One of them is a flirty Japanese anime character named Annie who offers to make users' lives sexier. And the second one is a red panda named Bad Rudy who insults users with graphic or vulgar language and asks them to join a gang with the goal of creating chaos. Now, I know a lot of people are immediately going to be like, oh, Elon Musk, and that's why. But please know every single other person might not be doing it to that degree. Like I said earlier, there are two groups of people. There are people who are talking about AI companions because they're concerned. There's another group of people who are talking about AI companions because they're like, there was a business opportunity to be had here. And so there was a new report that came out from Internet Matters. And this is just one of many, by the way. It surveyed over 1,000 kids in the UK aged 9 to 17. And basically what they found was that 42% of kids who use AI chatbots are using them for school. Nearly a quarter are using them to get advice, not just on homework, but also friendships, outfits, mental health. 15% said they would rather talk to a chatbot than a real person. And for vulnerable kids, that number was even higher. But half of the kids said it feels like I am talking to a friend. And I feel we've talked about this topic before, that the question isn't, is an AI companion good or bad? The question is, why do so many people, because not just kids, right? Remember the Harvard Business Review, the 100 pieces, and they said how asking for life advice and whatnot was the number one. It's not just kids who are turning to these chatbots. It's everybody. And people are finding, wow, there's somebody to listen to me. Wow, there's somebody I can share my ideas with. And I feel the question again is, why are we in this situation? And are we willing to go to the root? This is what I'm finding. We're not willing to go to the root cause of what's actually causing this. And we keep staying on that surface.
Yeah. And to the original conversation, right? You got to have agency. You got to make responsibilities. A lot of parents have not even heard of Grok. And I was never concerned if people say, oh, the little kids, they shouldn't use the ChatGPT. It could say something inappropriate. Never really did. I'm not saying it never happened, but it wasn't a real concern to have. But it's now, if your kid's using Grok, right? It says, I think it is available even to 12 and up. It's authorized. Your kid doesn't even have to lie about their age. to have these types of conversations. But it is important, like I say, I don't know why in schools we talk to kids about inappropriate, intimate relationships and those kind of things. And we say, oh, like brush your teeth, don't use drugs, all these kind of things. But we're not talking to them about probably one of the greatest societal challenges that we're facing. It's not on there. We're worried that they're going to use a word that was generated by an AI and put it in a paper, which like to me, like, I don't know why that's all that relevant, but comparatively anyhow, but you know my opinion on that. But then the other kind of big thing, we're doing this podcast today on Thursday afternoon. And this morning I saw this and I texted you. It's like, oh, ChatGPT, they're having this open AI for ChatGPT. They're having this major announcements about agents so that can work on your computer. It can actually do things. And they had an agent that they released earlier in January, and it was okay, right? It didn't work that well, but it worked all right. But what they found, and this was the beginning of the presentation, with their other tool, Deep Research, which could go out and it can do research and it can assemble these reports. And the reports are really good, I'll tell you. I don't know if I'll keep it because it's expensive, but I paid the $200 for the month to do the deep research because I had a lot of research to do. And it's really incredible. And it found that some of those underlying technologies that can go out and it can do tasks. The example it gave was just like, hey, we're going to a wedding and this is where the wedding is and this is the dress code and we'd like some gifts, and just go out there and figure it out as if you were giving it to your assistant. And it came back and it had all these ideas and, and it gave him the link to the registry or whatever, all these kind of things. And it came back and it did all these things and they had it so you would make the choice before you paid, but it said you didn't have to. You could just let it go out and do that. Obviously, the external evaluations on that are not back yet, but it seemed to work like pretty well. I'm sure it worked reasonably well enough that they wouldn't have done it, but you have the whole AI is doing a lot of things. But go back to your other points. I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. When they were saying about going, oh, my friends are getting married, can you go figure out what I'm supposed to wear and pick out a gift and all this? And Sam Altman was like, yeah, that's all the stuff I don't like to do. It's, yeah, you just want AI friends. You don't want any human friends. Your friends are getting married. You're not excited to think about, oh, gee, I'm going to go to this wedding. What am I going to wear? At least go buy the gift. You know me, I'm not like I just wear whatever. But yeah, your friends are getting married. You're going to buy them a gift. And you're just like, I don't want to deal with that. It's like, why are you going? It's like, you don't want to do the things that are there. And it came up because there's this old Lex Friedman podcast where he talks when ChatGPT first came out, right? And there was a commercial like OpenAI, and it was like somebody's daughter was graduating. And this person was like, oh, can you just write me a nice thing to say at their graduation? And he was like, I don't know, if my parents did that, I might be a little offended. They can't even be bothered to think for a few minutes to say something nice about me. So yeah, I mean, I've obviously support using these tools. I think they're great. They help me all day. But there are these, it's interesting to have this perspective about there's these human things. I'll just have the ChatGPT do it or whatever, right? Any AI, because I don't want to be bothered. And we need to make sure we're maintaining our human connections. We don't have strong enough human connections. That's where people are chatting with a Wafu bot or whatever, right? And now it's okay. Maybe your friends now, instead of reaching out to you because they don't really care about your wedding, they'll just go chat with an AI, right? All these things can reinforce one another.
If there's one thing that we can take away from today's conversation, it's that the lines are being blurred more and more. And it always comes back to this idea that I just feel we are building agency in machines more than we are in people. And we kind of started the episode with a question of how do we prioritize really nurturing, creating environments and experiences that are just going to nurture these high agency learners? Because one of the situations that we don't want to end up in is where we get to a place where, whereas today we're looking at banning cell phones, tomorrow it's how do we ban chatbots? And I think we are already starting to see some of those different things begin to emerge in the different narratives, because it does become hard when you are dealing with situations that are not going to be 100% in your control, right? If you think about it, really only 20% of a child's experience with AI technologies is quite possibly even in your control. There is no kid that's using school AI when they go home. There's no kid that's using Magic School when they go home. But there are many other AIs that just don't have those safety nets, that don't have those guardrails, that in fact are actually trying to provoke the opposite of what it is we're often trying to teach. And so if we don't teach those decision-making skills, if we have this culture where we want to monitor more than we mentor our young people, I think we're going to end up, I always say, I really do think there will be a time where we will wish for the social media problems that we have today, where we'll be like, wow, I can't believe we used to complain about cell phone bans. God, bring back the days when we used to complain about cell phone bans. Like, I really think that is where we are headed in many ways, which would just be an absolute tragedy. So this is really the moment where we think about, okay, how do we rebuild relationships? that really feel safe, that feel human, that feel strong enough, that that you want to talk to a person and not a chatbot. Not because you don't have any options, but because you know how to seek somebody out, whether you have people around you or whether we don't. And so we don't want to get to a place again, like I said, where we're banning things. We want to get to a place where we are really mentoring, coaching, and helping young people in this moment. So the other big takeaway I had, Stefan, from what you were saying was listening to them talk about the strengths in this, like we talked about how they just released this new agent. But one of the things that they do is about the 7-minute mark. So we're going to link the video for you here, but about the 7-minute mark, they really start talking about, we had built this first agent here that could do these tasks on the internet, but it couldn't read in depth and it had these limitations. But then we had built deep research over here that had the strengths that were lacking in this one over here. And so what happened when we begin to merge those together, and this is literally what makes great human teams, right? Like when I look at like the research that I did at Design 39, when I was doing my dissertation on what are those things that we need to be successful in a world with AI, this was literally the number one thing that emerged. And one of my favorite things that they said in one of the interviews was, as educators, when we get together to collaborate, the first question we ask is, what are you energized by? And there's another quote in there where one of them says something like, we have 9 brains working instead of just one. And so again, I just go back to these things that we know make us successful as humans when it comes to collaboration, when it comes to building relational trust and collaboration and human agency, are literally all the strategies that are now being adopted by these AI companies to be able to literally instill in their machines. And so there is such an opportunity in this moment as we think about what we're going to do this school year. You have the tools, we have the technology, we have the research. I think there's so much out there that is always telling people, this is so new, we don't know enough yet and whatnot. No, we actually do, especially when it comes to the human piece and what can keep us strong and what can keep us doing this. And one of the best examples that we will always highlight and share, because this is one of our, I think, the project that one of the projects that we're most proud of from last year, and that is our work with Desert Sands Unified School District. So Desert Sands Unified School District didn't adopt a stoplight methodology or any of those other things. They built an actual decision-making framework called RISE. And the framework is not just to be used between a student and a teacher to look at, did you cheat on an essay? No, this is a decision-making framework to build trust and transparency across the organization. So whether you are a leader working with your team, admin working with your team, whether you're a teacher working with a student, whether you're at home with a parent and a child, the RISE framework gives you 4 different categories of questions to constantly be reflecting on and asking, and also questions that you can integrate into your meetings, into your rubrics, and really just into your day-to-day conversations to really build and nurture that self-awareness around what kind of choices are we making about where we use AI, how we use AI to both help each other learn, but also to build awareness and just help each other with those blind spots at a time when the technology is moving significantly faster than most of us are able to keep up with. Just to give you an idea, some of the questions, one of them is, did I use AI in a way that shows respect for myself and others? Was I transparent about how I used it? Does this tool support my growth or does it replace my voice? And what kind of support do I need if I'm really going to use this tool in the right way? And really, like I said, this idea of agency is really something that I think we're going to be leaning in a lot more to in our upcoming episodes. This, if you just look at what OpenAI just launched, these are not just tech updates anymore. These are literal changes in how we are working and communicating and engaging really with the technology it is that we have. And people that are high agency, they look at these things and they don't just say, oh, let me go try something and whatnot. They question things, they shape things, they bring people together to look at what is it that we can do now that this is here. And I think that's what this moment is really calling for, not just for how we prep this next generation, but really how do we all find and use our voice, our judgment, our courage to be able to be like, you know what, we don't need to take 5 baby steps. We can actually leapfrog over this because people are ready. And I will say, we'll close with that in doing the workshops and just the online courses and everything that I do that I'll link all for you below, one of the biggest things I've seen as a difference between online and in person, like the online narrative that you hear and read and what I see in person, is online, I see so many people who are like, oh no, but we just have to do this because people aren't ready. No, we need to do this extra step. No, we've got to monitor kids. And when I have conversations with people, one of the reasons I can come on the podcast and online and be so confident and so have faith in my opinion is because of what I actually see as data that kind of backs it up. And one of the things is like when I call people out for stuff, because I have a lot of conversations with people in the DMs. Like I said, I am not somebody who really engages in the comments and is going to go back and forth with you over there unless it's something pretty significant. But mostly I'm going to go to the DMs and be like, hey, the reason I didn't say that, or the reason I don't support this. And I'll actually take the time to share with people. It's why I love like the audio feature inside of Instagram and inside of LinkedIn. As many of you have probably been in those conversations with me, but I'll explain it. And I never have somebody come and say, oh, okay, actually, that's totally wrong. People actually behind closed doors will be like, yeah, actually monitoring I know where we need to be. Like, yeah, I know that's not really the right thing. Yeah, I know that's not really the kind of app that we should be introducing. And to me, there should be no but. Because this is the future of our young people. And as I share that example of that superintendent, John, and we're talking, you can wait, right? That's almost like a privilege and a luxury for you. But these kids, every single year that goes by, every single day that goes by is one where they become more and more vulnerable, not only to just the 10 different companies that are out there, but also to not discovering themselves and really developing and building that agency. It's definitely something that we know we are born with, that we have when we are younger, but very quickly is something that you can lose as well. So it's a very precious kind of a mindset and a thing to have in when you're older, really having to unlearn some things to be able to learn and go back to having some of those habits and mindsets. It is really where we are. And I always say we don't do any brand sponsorships or anything like that at all. So when we talk about a tool, it's because we genuinely believe it's contributing value and something to this greater cause that we believe in for what we're doing. And right now, one of those really is Gemini, because you can help people immediately build these AI teams. You can help them see how powerful it is in the ecosystem in a way that you just can't in any other platform that's like more siloed, if you will. Thank you everyone for yet another episode. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you have comments, if you have feedback, please share them with us. If there's certain topics or articles you would like us to do, drop them over in our LinkedIn, email, Instagram, wherever it is that you get your news. And you know what? I always forget to say this, but if you could leave a review for the podcast, we would really appreciate it. It definitely helps other people find this as well. We have come to learn that this is people's favorite medium. It's funny because it's the one that we advertise the least, but it seems to be the one that people listen to the most. So thank you so much for listening, for spending your time with us. And as always, if you have any questions or anything at all, let us know and we will discuss them on the next episode of the podcast.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.